Hi, everybody. My name is Barbara Theroux, and I am a book collector, a book fanatic, and I'm here to talk to you about the Fort Missoula Museum book sale. It's always a big favorite in November, but this year it's going to be a little different. It's coming to you virtually. And in order to hopefully get you excited about going to fortmissoulamuseum.org, I'm here to talk about some books that I've collected. Some of them have come from book sales, some of them I have grown up with, some of them I've even purchased. And then I want to read you a story. So remember, these are not things that will be at the virtual book sale. These are things that you could look for. Do you have some favorite books? I have a selection of children's books that are some of my favorites. This one, Mother West Wind, this one did come from a book sale. It's a used book. It has a copyright of 1910, and it had originally been in a school library. Well, I always liked Thurton Borges. Winnie the Pooh. Now, he's been one of my favorites for a long time. This one was in my home family library. It was reprinted in August of 1950. So, not to give anything away, I was 2 years old when this book was in our family library. These little books are also Winnie the Pooh, and they're separate little stories, which I will probably come back and read from. But see, you can find old books, old favorites. Yes, you can buy them, but it's sometimes nice to have one that has been loved by somebody else. Another small book I have is The Night Before Christmas. It's got beautiful illustrations, and I don't know where I found this, but somebody gave it to me along the way because they knew I liked holiday books. Look at this treasure. Some of these came from book sales. I don't know if you'll find them in Missoula or not, but The Christmas in the Country, this one, I knew somebody that really liked this book when she was growing up and couldn't find it. So I let her photocopy mine. But the good news is it's going to come available this year as a reissue. So you can find an old one, and maybe with enough pressure, publishers will reprint one. But here's some more. Howdy Doody's Christmas, Donald Duck and Santa Claus, The Animals Christmas Eve, Another Night Before Christmas, and Frosty the Snowman. Night Before Christmas, another funny story. I know somebody who used to buy a different edition every year and send it to a family member. Not knowing if they caught on, but I think it's really great. How many different editions of The Night Before Christmas do you have at your house? I know somebody that collects editions of a book, and he'll probably go to the virtual book sale. He loves to go to book sales and secondhand stores and look for Frankenstein. So remember, I'm just showing you some things that I've found over the years, whether it's been in my home library or in other book sales. But this is because of the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula and their virtual book sale this year. You can find it at fortmissoulamuseum.org. So let me share one of these little books with you. And I'm going to share Eeyore Loses a Tail. The old gray donkey Eeyore stood by himself in a thistly corner of the forest, his front feet well apart, his head on one side, and thought about things. Some days he thought sadly to himself, why? And sometimes he thought, wherefore? And sometimes he thought, inasmuch as. And sometimes he didn't quite know what he was thinking about. So when Winnie the Pooh came stumbling along, Eeyore was very glad to be able to stop thinking for a little while to say, how do you do? And how are you? Said Winnie the Pooh. Eeyore shook his head from side to side. Not very how, he said. I don't seem to have felt at all for a long time now. Dear, dear, said Pooh. I'm sorry about that. Let's have a look at you. So Eeyore stood there gazing sadly at the ground, and Winnie the Pooh walked all around him once. Why, what's happened to your tail? He said in surprise. What has happened to it? Said Eeyore. It isn't there. Are you sure? Well, either a tail is there or it isn't there. You can't make a mistake about it, and yours isn't there. And then what is? Nothing. Let's have a look, said Eeyore, and he turned slowly around to the place where his tail had been a little while ago, and then finding that he couldn't catch it up, he turned around the other way until he came back to where it was at first. And then he put his head down and looked between his front legs, and at last he said with a long, sad sigh, I believe you're right. Of course I'm right, said Pooh. That accounts for a good deal, said Eeyore gloomily. It explains everything. No wonder. You must have left it somewhere, said Winnie the Pooh. Somebody must have taken it, said Eeyore. How like them, he added after a long silence. Pooh felt that he ought to say something helpful about it, but didn't quite know what, so he decided to do something helpful instead. Eeyore, he said, I, Winnie the Pooh, will find your tail for you. Thank you, Pooh, said Eeyore. You're a real friend. And he said, not like some. So Winnie the Pooh went off to find Eeyore's tail. It was a fine spring morning in the forest as he started out. Little soft clouds played happily in the blue sky, skipping from time to time in front of the sun as if they had come to put it out, and then sliding away suddenly so that the next night might have their turn. Through them and between them, the sun shone bravely, and a horse which had worn its furs all the year round seemed old and dowdy, but beside the new green lace with the beeches that had put on prettily. Though the corpse then finally marched the bear down the open slopes, and he arrived at the 100-acre woods, for that's where Owl lived. And if anyone knows anything about anything, Owl, who knows something about something, he said, or my name's not Winnie the Pooh, which it is, he added, so there you are. Owl lived at the chestnuts on the old world residence of the Great Charm, which was grander than anybody else's, or seemed so to bear. Underneath the knocker, there was a notice which said, please ring if an answer is required. Underneath the bell pull, there was a note which said, please knock if an answer is not required. These notices had been written by Christopher Robin, who was the only one in the forest who could spell. For Owl, wise though he was in many ways, able to read and write and spell his own name, W-O-L, yet somehow went all to pieces over delicate words like measles and buttered toast. Winnie the Pooh read the two notices very carefully, first from left to right, and afterwards in right to left. Oh, and afterwards, in case he missed it, he read it one more time. Then he knocked, and he pulled and knocked. So he did them both. He was very indecisive. Owl, I require an answer. It's Bear speaking. And the door opened, and Owl looked out. Hello, Pooh, he said. How's things? Terrible and sad, said Pooh, because Eeyore, who is a friend of mine, has lost his tail, and he's moping about. So could you kindly tell me how to find it for him? Well, said Owl, the customary procedure in such cases is as follows. For I'm a bear of very little brain and I have long words to bother remembering. It means the thing to do. As long as it means that, I don't mind, said Pooh. The thing to do is as follows. First, issue a reward. Then, just a moment, said Pooh, holding up his paw. What do you do to this? What are you saying? You squeezed just as you were going to tell me. I didn't sneeze. I didn't squeeze. Yes, you did, Owl. Excuse me, Pooh. I didn't. You can't sneeze without knowing it. Well, you can't know it without something having been sneezed. What I said was, first issue a reward. You did it again, said Pooh. A reward. We write a notice to say that we will give a large something to anybody who finds Eeyore's tail. I see, said Pooh. Talking about large somethings, I generally have a small something about this time in the morning. And he looked wistfully at the cupboard in the corner of Owl's parlor. Just a mouthful of condensed milk or whatnot, with perhaps a lick of honey. Well then, said Owl, we write out this notice and we put it up all over the forest. A lick of honey, murmured Bear to himself, or not, as the case may be. And he gave a deep sigh and tried very hard to listen to what Owl was saying. But Owl went on and on, using longer and longer words, until at last he came back to where he started, and he explained that the person to write out this notice was Christopher Robin. It was he who wrote the ones on my front door for me. Did you see them? For some time now, Pooh had been saying yes and no in turn with his eyes shut. In all that Owl was saying, and having said yes, yes, last time, he said no, not at all. Now, without really knowing what Owl was talking about. Didn't you see them? Come and look at them now. So they went outside, and Pooh looked at the knocker and the notice below, and he looked at the bell rope and the notice below it, and the more he looked at the bell rope, the more he felt that he had seen something like it somewhere else, somewhere before. Handsome bell rope, isn't it? Said Owl. Can you see this small picture? What do you think that bell rope is? It's pretty handsome, but it's a bell rope. Yes, Pooh nodded. It reminds me of something, but I can't think what. Where did you get it? I just came across it in the forest. It was hanging over a bush, and I thought at first somebody lived there, so I rang it, and nothing happened. And then I rang it again very loudly, and it came off in my hand. And as nobody seemed to want it, I took it home. And Owl, said Pooh solemnly, you made a mistake. Somebody did want it. Who? Eeyore, my dear friend Eeyore. He was fond of it. Fond of it? Attached to it, said Winnie the Pooh sadly. So with these words, he unhooked it and carried it back to Eeyore, and then Christopher Robin nailed it on as its right place again, and Eeyore frisked about the forest, waving his tail happily, that Winnie the Pooh came over all funny and had to hurry home for a little snack of something to sustain him. And wiping his mouth half an hour afterwards, he sang to himself proudly, Who found the tail? I, said Pooh, at 1:45. Only at 11:15, really. I found the tail. And there's happy Eeyore with his tail. And that's from my wonderful collected teeny tiny collection of Winnie the Pooh tales. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story, and I hope you plan to go to the Fort Missoula Museum's historical book sale Their sale that runs every November when it's gift giving time, well, it's going to be virtual this year. It's going to be online. You can go to fortmissoulamuseum.org and see the selection. Remember, these books I just showed you, my fun Christmas books and my Winnie the Pooh books, they're not in the sale, but you can go online and look, and you can help support history. You can help support Missoula. You can help support your own library or give books to everybody that you know and love. Thanks, and have a great time. Where does it say?